Crooked Joe Biden just agreed to pay a $6 billion ransom to the Iranian dictatorship in exchange for hostages. This is yet another Biden surrender and a further blistering humiliation of the United States of America to the world stage. But even worse, this decision will be extremely deadly. Biden is giving $6 billion to the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, just as when Obama sent the Iranian regime pallets of cash for hostages in the dark of night. Remember? Plane loads of cash. Biden's ransom payment will be immediately used to stoke violence, bloodshed, and mayhem throughout the Middle East and all around the world, costing countless innocent lives. It's also guaranteed that the fanatical Iranian regime will use this money to advance their nuclear weapons program, putting Israel, the United States, and the entire world in very grave peril. They are reportedly just weeks away from a nuclear bomb, something which would have never happened under the Trump administration. Tragically, Biden's ransom payments also make it dramatically more likely that even more Americans will be held captive in the future, because Biden has shown that he will pay gargantuan sums of money, meaning the kidnappers turn a massive profit. They're making money hand over fist. In other words, Biden has put a bounty on the head of every American citizen abroad. Under my leadership, we brought home more than 50 hostages from all over the world, and we never paid ransom money to do it, not at all. We did it with diplomacy, and we did it through strength, and we will do it again when we are reelected as President of the United States. Our country is failing. We are a failing nation. We will turn it around, and we will make America great again. Thank you.
The U.S. is now pausing payments temporarily to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, in Gaza after the UN fired 12 staffers over their alleged involvement in the October 7th attacks. But is it too late? The U.S. is the biggest donor to the agency, sending $296 million last year alone, and nearly $1 billion since Biden took office and resumed payments after Donald Trump had stopped them in 2018. Here to react is Senior VP for Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Jonathan Schanzer. Jonathan, thanks for being here. So we should note that Donald Trump stopped these payments for a reason. So we knew this agency was involved in nefarious work. Now it's revealed potentially involved in the terrorist attack. Break it down for us.
Sure. Well, it turns out the Israelis have been collecting intelligence on this group since the 10/7 attack. It looks like there are about a dozen people that were involved in the murders that took place on October 7th. The Israelis have been actually talking to some of the people that they arrested on that day and some of the fighters that they pulled out of Gaza, where they've learned more and more about how this organization was directly involved in Hamas attacks. This, of course, is not anything new for folks that have been watching this agency. Over the years, we've seen that there have been Hamas fighters firing rockets from within the compounds of the schools and hospitals that they run. There are tunnels that snake below. There's weapons storage facilities that they have within these buildings as well. So the Israelis have been on top of this for a long time. Obviously, the Trump administration as well. There was a series of tweets that Mike Pompeo put out in the waning days of the Trump administration, warning of how corrupt and nefarious this organization was, and no one seemed to care. Over the last 2 or 3 years, that bill has obviously come due. Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, it must have been evident enough, the intelligence there, if the Trump administration stopped funding. We knew this, that if UNRWA is able to operate inside the Gaza Strip or elsewhere, they're doing so at the behest of Hamas. And what they must have seen is that they've become an extension of that. So much of an extension of that they're willing to take part in terrorist attacks on October 7th. They say they're going to pause funding. Do you believe that? Or do you think there'll be a permanent stop? Or are we going to go back to funding the people that attack our friends? Look, I think it all really depends on how much evidence the Israelis are willing to make public. Right now, we haven't actually seen what they've seen. I think a huge amount of this is really going to hinge on whether the Israelis are willing to declassify that intelligence. And then on top of that, I think the Israelis are probably, if I'm reading the tea leaves right, they're going to release more information. about what this organization has been doing over the years, the way that they've taught the kids, beginning at age 4 or 5, to hate the Israelis, to talk about martyrdom and jihad, and the way that they cast the Israelis as enemies. So it's an education problem, it's a funding problem, it's a terrorism problem. Hopefully this is all going to be laid bare, and there'll be other agencies that can step in. It's not like UNRWA has to be the only agency that does this. There are plenty of other groups within the UN that could probably do it better without the violence, without the corruption, without the Hamas connections.
And there's plenty of countries also, especially in the Muslim Middle East, that could fund these things as well if they had so much compassion for the people being affected. Yet it seems to be us who's always footing the bill, and then we're footing the bill for schools that teach young kids to hate the West, America, and Israel. Jonathan Shanzer, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You got it.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.
Thank you. John, you said this month about the UNRWA, you can't hold them accountable for the depredations of Hamas. How about now?
Certainly, it looks as if, Peter, and again, there's an investigation going on, so I'll be careful, but it certainly looks as if there's cause to be concerned about the actions of some of the members of UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency, but that does not, and nor should it, impugn the entire agency and all the body of work that they're doing. They have helped save literally thousands of lives in Gaza. They do important work. Doesn't mean that there aren't some folks in that group that need to be punished for potentially these kinds of behavior, but that doesn't impugn the entire organization.
That's bad, though. If there are 12 people who are accused,
it's bad. It's bad if there's one. It's bad if there's one.
That's bad. And the U.S. is giving them money. How much money?
We have suspended them. We have suspended.
Before the suspension?
I don't have the dollar figures here,
John.
Peter. I'll take the question and get back to you, but we have suspended unallocated funds pending the outcome of the investigation.
Who does this White House vet? Because we know that people coming across the southern border are not vetted. Now we know that people that are getting hundreds of millions of dollars of U.S. money are not being vetted. So who do you guys check out?
It's interesting that you're combining the two. The border in this, but let me just give me a second. It's not like we don't have a process at the border, and there is a challenge there, and the president does want to get more border patrol agents. But this idea that just there's no vetting and there's no proper immigration enforcement going on at the border just does not comport with reality. There's a lot of work needs to be done to get better at that. But put that aside, because that has nothing to do, and it has nothing to do with UNRWA and Gaza.
What this administration is doing and how
it is a UN,
resources are being used.
It is a UN agency, and yes, we have contributed to their work, and that work has been meaningful, and it has been important in places like Gaza. But we also are willing to hold them accountable for this particular incident and before the alleged behavior by these particular employees. And as I've said, wait, just give me a second now. As I said, we want this investigation to be complete and thorough and transparent. And if in the investigation it's determined that people need to be held accountable, then obviously we want to see that too.
But up until today, the U.S. policy then has been, we don't negotiate with terrorists, but we will give them hundreds of millions of dollars.
Come on now, that's conflating here. This is not. That's like saying the whole UNRWA is a terrorist organization. You know who is a terrorist organization? Hamas, not UNRWA. Now, if the investigation proves that, in this case, I think it's about a dozen employees were assisting Hamas, and even to the point of maybe even involved in hostage taking, then absolutely they need to be held to account. And we will, although we've already suspended any additional allocations to UNRWA, we'll certainly consider additional, depending on the investigation, whether that requires any additional changes in the way we support UNRWA going forward.
Thank you. I'd like to ask. There was a lot of conversation about this $6 billion payment over the weekend. What do we need to know?
And making this all worse, the State Department confirming 9 Americans have been killed. Now, President Joe Biden coming out quickly condemning the attack, but he refused to say who was ultimately behind it.
The United States stands with Israel. We will not ever fail to have their back. We'll make sure that they have the help their citizens need and they can continue to defend themselves.
Representative Mike Waltz on the House Foreign Relations Committee, Intel Committee, points the finger directly at Iran.
At the end of the day, this is 100% Iran. Hamas doesn't so much fire a BB gun without Iran giving it the permission and the resources and the green light to do so. And to now find out that there were weekly planning meetings, extensive coordination with the Iranian regime, we still have a lot to unpack here.
So the attack on Israel by Hamas comes about 3 weeks since President Biden authorized the release of $6 billion to Iran, as well as releasing 5 Iranian convicts to get 5 American hostages. Right now, the money sits in a central bank in Qatar, unfrozen. The U.S. says it will only be used for humanitarian aid in Iran. Even if that's true, it frees up the money Iran is using right now for aid to be directed elsewhere. Still, over the weekend, the Biden administration hedging its bets on blame.
We don't have anything that shows us that Iran was directly involved in this attack and in planning it or in carrying out. But that's something we're looking at very carefully, and we've got to see where the facts lead. But we do know that Iran's had a long relationship with Hamas.
And the president with no public events on his calendar today. Back to you guys.
But do you expect you'll hear from anybody at the White House? Like, surely they'll put somebody on camera today, Edward?
You know, the pressure has to be mounting here at the White House. We have not heard as of yet that someone's going to come out and speak. But, you know, over the weekend, you saw quickly the president came out on Saturday to make an announcement about this, to quickly condemn it. You saw Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He was out. So you've got to there is pressure mounting within this White House to do something. I have asked today if the president is going to add something to his schedule. I did not hear back on that front. But you have to believe that behind the scenes they are working to figure out how this messaging should go forward.
All right, and we do know that we've just heard that John Kirby, the spokesperson for the National Security Council, he will be on at 3 p.m. with Martha McCallum on the story.